So, welcome to another podcast. My name is Glenn Moore, and we have a very special guest for you today. But first, let me ask you a couple of questions. How often do we look for the source, the root cause of our health issues? How often we actually look for the source, the root cause of our health issues, as opposed to focusing on the symptoms? Could we attain complete health and well-being by doing so? Well, my very special guest today is Donna Grant. Donna is a dedicated teacher, therapist, and consultant, and she runs her own retreat and workshop space on the beautiful Black Isle in Scotland. Her mission is to help others identify and heal unconscious wounds and to shift and transform internal negativity into well-being and self-worth. To this end, for 15 years now, she has used a blend of healing modalities, including energy psychology, clinical hypnotherapy, EFT, creative therapy, and shamanic practices to achieve effective healing. More recently, she has become chief advisor and wellness wonder woman for the children's health platform, Happy Marlo. And Donna is particularly interested in working with children. We'll come on to that. Welcome, Donna. I never thought I would have Wonder Woman on my podcast, so this is a very special treat. Thank you very much for joining me. How
Oh,
are you?
thank you, Glenn. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm really grateful. Thank you. I'm doing really well here on Black Isle. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So maybe we can start by telling us a little bit about your background, Donna, how you came to be where you are now, what you focused on, any sort of motivation or inspiration that has drawn you or taken you to where you are now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My work now is, as you've already spoken, my passion. And it became a passion because, a while back, I was less than on my path. I was a kind of car crash, so to speak, and my life was not particularly flowing. I had terrible self-esteem issues, and I was making choices on a subconscious level that kind of I became the self-fulfilling prophecy that I was not good enough, not worthy, and started to manifest these things in my life. So I was really curious when I started different therapies to why was I making choices that were really unhealthy, bad, or whatever you might judge them as, but they were certainly not creating my optimal health. So the journey began with me and my sort of interest in understanding myself. And I did different talk therapies initially, and then kind of went through the subconscious path, looking at hypnotherapy and what our early years programming and how that affects us. And then I decided to train in this. Wasn't really a conscious decision as such, but actually it was more like a calling. And I ended up having an amazing teacher who was very passionate about epigenetics, the root cause, and our core belief systems. And for me, that moment of understanding that was like a light bulb. A moment where I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. These core belief systems that are created in our early 0 to 6 years, our hardwired programming was the reason why I kept reverting back to behaviors, even though I was doing a lot of other therapies and a lot of other ways to support myself. So I was like, I need to learn this. And after being a very enthusiastic student, she was just like, oh, just come and do my course. And that is how it began. So I started to learn about Bruce Lipton's work, the biology of belief, and how, our thoughts and our belief systems program our DNA and our stressors. So, yeah, that was my doorway into this world that I work in now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, something that I found wonderful and intriguing. You said that you turn wounds into wisdom. What a
Yeah.
great expression. I love it.
Oh,
Can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe how you go about that?
yeah. For me, I'm very kinesthetic. I'm a feeler. I feel things in my body, and I think in energy psychology and my practice, I really believe that the body is the messenger. And when we really tune in to what our bodies are trying to speak to us, whether it's feelings or physical symptoms or emotions, they are kind of like the portal to the healing, and that they kind of direct us to where the roots are. So, when we look at our wounding, whether it be emotional, physical, mental, whatever it is, if we start to meet it with love and compassion and start to understand, it kind of opens up a doorway into the roots, into the subconscious programming and the initial sensory event that created that. So for me, when someone's got something really bubbling that feels really, awkward or difficult or uncomfortable to look at, that would be the point of interest. Like, okay, that's an invitation, right? To look a lot deeper to see what's going on. And for me, when we do that work, it can, be the unwitting key to undoing a lot of negative behaviors, patterns, and, physical symptoms as well.
Mm, beautiful. Now, one of the things you use as a modality, if I can call it that, is energy psychology. Now, for viewers who may not know what that is and how it works, can you give us a little summary of that?
Sure. Energy psychology is kind of like an umbrella term when, like I spoke, like we're kind of using the energy, the wisdom of our body, we're tuning into it. So instead of avoiding and you know um that's sort of fake positivity when we're like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. We actually, it's an invitation, right, to go, okay, what's going on here? And energy psychology, there's a few different modalities that would come under the umbrella term, but the one I mainly use is EFT, emotional freedom technique. And I use it in a way that helps us lots of different threads of that now. But the way it kind of works for me is that we can bypass the analytical mind and get underneath. So it's a fantastic tool based on meridian line therapy for undoing, circuits that keep us stuck in survival. And when we move beyond that, we can really get into, whatever's going on in the soul, in the subconscious, and in the body. And it's fast, it's very effective work. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
And I think you told me that when you first discovered energy psychology and EFT, it was like a pivotal moment of transformation in your life.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, EFT, I think there's an art to EFT and how you use it. It can just calm down emotions. It can be a great stress tool, but if we use it to kind of as a space of self-exploration, of inner work, and in a held space, it can get right back to the root cause of the trauma. So, we can't access that from a cerebral place. We need to go into a much deeper place. So for me, it opened up a world of healing that I was very keen to do and take me right back to, the stored trauma, the kind of filter that we see the world through, which for me was around about my 0 to 3 years, 3 years old. And my story is not a huge traumatic story, but it's the perception of the child at the time. So
Mm.
for me, it was my 3-year-old self. My father left and I never saw him again. It was the way it was dealt with. It was the moment of separation where I literally split. So I could go back to that moment and use the EFT on the fragmented aspect of myself. And that's the difference. And so that's really going into the matrix then when we start to work in the quantum field of healing, when we can tap on the fragmented aspects of ourselves. And that for me really started to change the neural pathways and became, my interest in my work. And it was the greatest. I mean, I met my first client was a big trauma case. It was quite ambitious of me to take it on, but I visited her every day in hospital, and she's a wonderful supporter of this work now. And we saw someone who was paralyzed through shock and fear come to life again, and that was for me the greatest teaching that I ever had, to witness the progress of somebody so deeply traumatized.
Wow. Wow.
The word I hear most is it's empowering. We stay separate. It's not like any other trauma techniques where we can kind of re-traumatize. Like EMDR for me it doesn't work with children, right? It's too much. And for this, we stay the hero of our story. We stay separate, or the rescuer, the safe parent, and we go in as our adult self to work with the fragmented aspects of ourselves.
Mm.
That's the difference, and that's where the power and the transformational aspect comes. And the words I hear after a session are empowering, transformative. It's safe.
Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now, you're not just a healer, you also teach, and you also offer workshops and retreats as a facilitator.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about those.
So it feels like I'm sort of quite purpose driven, I suppose. And even though my mind says sometimes just to stay in my box and keep doing what I'm doing, which I enjoy, I feel like I need to get it out into the world more. So retreats, I really enjoy bringing people together, and sometimes that's an invitation to do the deeper work. So my retreat center here is focused on working with nature and bringing that inner harmony within, and using different modalities to access that. And really teaching and is the biggest calling when you've got clients going, will you teach me this? I'm like, okay, this is the sign that it needs to happen now. So I'm teaching, and I'm setting up workshops up and down the country, but also here and online, so it's accessible. It's my passion. It feels like time to teach this and the power of it. But I do blend it with a little bit of shamanic work, a little bit of hypnotherapy, a bit of heart math. It's kind of intuitive, and it's very much about getting out the way and letting all these beautiful modalities and intuition flow.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Donna, because one thing I'm curious about, and I'm sure people viewing this will also be curious, is that, and this is a bit of a generalization, but forgive me, but supposing a client comes to you, you have so many strings to your bow, so to speak, with these various modalities that you've described and also appear on your website. How do you know which ones to apply and what's right for which person? Is it purely intuitive? Does it depend on their presenting problem, let's call it? Whether it's a trauma-based thing, whether it's a more physical thing, physical rather than emotional or mental, etc. How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people contact me with a specific issue, and sometimes people can't put their finger on it. But what we do is when we have a little initial chat, things start to bubble up already. So that's the invitation right there. That's the portal to go through. So whether it's emotion, the issue, or the generalization of what they're feeling in their life, we just hone in on it, and then we go in. Generally, I would start with EFT and then we can go off in a direction, because it helps you just come into the messages that we're receiving with a sharpness and a clarity that we can get out of the way. And it also helps to soothe and bring you into parasympathetic, out of the survival response. So there is intuition, but my primary focus is making sure somebody feels safe with me, that they feel in control so they can go deep enough. And holding somebody and having that sense of safety is key to the success of the therapy. So my goal is always to get back to the roots, but that might not be right for somebody in their first session. That might be overwhelming. But sometimes you're very surprised that we're session number one, we're back at birth. It could go in all
Mm-hmm.
directions. So it's to be open and trust that whatever comes through will come through. The other thing I have to say is I'm sure I'm getting a little support from spirit here. It's not all down to me. There was a point where I
So,
was like, oh, look at me doing this. My ego was like very, very nourished. But actually, when I first started out, I wanted to be considered very scientific. And, I'm very serious about this because I didn't want to come across too woo-woo. But, ultimately, spirit was like banging on the door, going, are you serious? You really think you're doing all this on your own? So, yes,
wow.
be
Yeah.
open to it all, really.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. So, again, this may be a bit of a generalized question, but have you found that people who come to you, I mean, is there a sort of a trend or a pattern that you notice? I mean, is it mostly trauma based? Is it abuse? Is it abandonment issues? I mean, I'm just trying to give, the sort of a more general picture, if you like, and you can steer this whichever way you want. Um, in other words, why would someone come to you as opposed to another healer or EFT or energy psychologist?
Yeah. Well, I think you're drawn to who you want to work with. I think that's really important. Yeah, like I said, feeling safe with someone, feeling that you're not being in a place of, you're not being judged. I have experienced quite a lot of trauma in my own life. So, when when people come through my door, it's generally there's a lesson for me in that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it works in a beautiful synergy, and issues come in waves, like all of a sudden I'll have people who want to lose weight or trauma or childhood abuse. But, under the surface, really, we are all, battling against our core belief systems. So it's all one and the same, whether you're coming in with a specific habit you want to give up, or you want to work on your self esteem, or you're not sleeping. Underneath it all, we have core belief systems that are the driving system to every habit, pattern, and behavior that we have. So, you might not know that when you walk through the door to have a session with me, but that's where we're going. So, it's very, very general, but generally it's a sense of feeling drawn to this work and drawn to working with me because
Mm-hmm.
on some level that feels safe for that person energetically, I'm sure, as well. But yeah, it can be very varied. I do work, as you mentioned, work a lot with children. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Let's go into that, shall we? Because I'm very curious, and I'm sure people listening would like to know about your Wonder Woman for children's health, um, namely the platform Happy Marlo.
Yeah.
Tell us how that came about and where you are with that at the moment, and what sort of children's issues, if I can call them that are
Yeah.
coming to you.
Yeah, I mean, I accidentally became an expert in this field, I would say, because when I lived in the south in the New Forest, there was, Southampton, Bournemouth, and other areas. Yeah, councils reached out to me, other therapists, because there was nobody really tackling trauma with children in a safe way. And unfortunately, what I saw was that people were on waiting lists for years via CAMS and through the NHS and what they offered. And, I was seeing children. I was the last port of call. These parents were desperate for something and they were not getting seen. They were not getting support. And when they did get the support, finally, they did nothing. It was someone pushing a pen around a paper and judging a child. Now, you can't do that. That's not going to work in therapy. And I'm really passionate about this. The minute a child walks in the door to see me, I'm sitting on the floor with them and we're talking about what they love and what their passions are. And then we can start to get into, the trauma. Children are amazing at healing. So it for me, a top-down approach does not work with children. It needs to be creative. And this is where EFT is quite a creative process. So I was seeing children who had, gone into care, had experienced severe abuse. And if I had planned it in my career plan, I would not be choosing to work with that. But there's such a need that I ended up doing it. So my focus is always the goal at the end, which is, this conclusion, and not that we don't need to go into the big story of the trauma, the abuse, the neglect, whatever it was. But with children in EFT, we work very creatively. So I've got pens and everything out. And we also work in metaphor. The brain loves metaphor. So even if some child is remembering or having night terrors about the monster, we shift that, we create to that, we make them powerful, we bring in an ally. That might be the shamanic work, which the children are totally aligned with naturally. Or they might bring in a superhero, or they might need something to protect them. And this is where this work is so empowering, that they are not the victim anymore, that they have overcome this horrific abuse sometimes and walked away feeling empowered, safe, in themselves and in their homes. So yeah, that is a big, big passion of mine. So I started to work with care homes with children. I work with local councils. And then we started to develop Happy Marlo. Happy Marlo began as an app for kids. And then we struggled to get the momentum going and for people to engage in it. So then it became more recently a cartoon that we've created, and Marlo and Friends. And Marlo is kind of the leader of this little gang that shows them how to do tapping. So any emotion that's comes up is welcome, and they process it together on this journey, and it's really beautiful. So that's how we're going to send it out and make tapping EFT more accessible within schools. And also, hopefully we will be getting a nice slot on television. So any way we can reach kids, really. That would be them working on any difficult emotions. And then obviously with trauma, they would need a specialist to work with, which is where I come in. And the people I'm training, actually, because there is a real need for people doing this work with children. I believe anyway.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Sounds wonderful. So just to be clear, Happy Marlo, it's not a charity, it's a sort of organization of healers who work exclusively with children using EFT or other modalities as well.
Happy Marlo is primarily focused with EFT now, and I am the chief wellness woman, Wonder Woman, I think they call me on that. So I'm advising on that project. So yeah, that's what it is at the moment.
Now you also recently set up something, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, the Isla Maiden retreats, or is it Isla Maiden retreats?
Yeah.
Please correct my Scottish.
That's pretty good. Probably better than mine. Yeah.
And you're talking about healing using the wisdom of the soul. I mean, is that specific to those retreats? I'm just curious about the soul work. Is this using shamanic rituals as well?
Yeah. Not so much on that one. There are rituals, absolutely. There are rituals. The soul retrieval and the other work is kind of more in a practice. But I mean, I teach these tools, but in Ila Medine, we are just going into nature and using the elements actually to just really kind of help and support us. So yeah, it's really, I mean, it's where we are. So, the non-separation, that we are separate from nature, we are all part of the oneness. So it's really connecting into that through inner work, through journeying, through rituals, through the elements, through the landscape. The landscape is pretty spectacular here. So, as you know,
Mhm.
it's healing just by being here. Um, so that was it, and really awakening the ancient wisdom. So when I speak of that, it's really the ancient wisdom within us, but also around us. So the spirits of the land and the spirits of the plants and all of the nature
Mm.
wisdom that can come through in those retreats. So they're an absolute joy to do.
I mean, the way you describe it is such a great reminder of how much there is out there that
Mm.
can bring healing. Not just what we were talking about, but nature itself, and of course, love, which we haven't talked about, which I always think is the greatest or one of the greatest healers.
Absolutely.
Um, and but I wonder if you can answer this. What does healing mean to you in a more sort of expansive sense, in the bigger picture sense? And how do you see that in our current
Mm.
world situation, especially with all the new energies coming onto the planet? And how much of this is part of our transition, do you think, um, into a higher consciousness?
Yeah, it's all about that. For me, when I landed on these lands, the message was very clear. You are a conduit for consciousness, for higher consciousness in whatever way. So, whether I'm shape shifting in shamanic ways, whether I'm doing the EFT, my role is to bring people up and elevate them into a higher state of consciousness. And that, for me, on a vibrational level, is love, to come back to their most loving selves, whether it's
Mm,
within themselves, seeing the world through the filter of love rather than fear. And that's the work coming out of those negative belief systems that keep us in narrow fear focus, that keep the frontal lobes shut down. And, kind of when we disconnect from our frontal lobes, when we're in this state of fight, flight, freeze, then we've shut off consciousness, right? So if we can use tools to kind of raise children in this way, very often when I'm working with children, I need to see the parents, So
mm,
it's like this interconnection, this web of consciousness, that if we can use these tools to elevate our, and look at ourselves as, energy, that we can shift and evolve and raise our vibration just by sheer curiosity and looking within and learning to use anything that comes up, and sort of, it's an inner alchemy. It's turning the wounds, the pain, the suffering, the negative belief systems, the fear, into gold, into the energy of gold, which is the vibration of love.
mm.
And if we all did practices like this is why I'm so passionate about getting into schools and places like that. Or the school system being broken, but that's another story. Really, we wouldn't be coming from this fear state of mind, and we would be meeting everybody with the filter of love and understanding and compassion. And that is my ambitious sense, to create world peace through this work.
Wow. Donna, that is amazing. I love it. I love all your answers. Thank you very much for your sharing. Yeah, I have so many more questions for you, but let's leave it there and come back. I'd love to have you back on the podcast again. We can do that hopefully in the near future, where we can expand upon this. In the meantime, Donna Grant, thank you very, very much for your wisdom and sharing about your healing. And yeah, really delighted to have you. And I hope that those of you listening and watching will get value from what Donna has shared. Finally, Donna, what is the best way that people can contact you? I know you have a website. Is that the best communication direction?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is a great way to communicate to me. I can share my email. That's when I would, normally get back to you quite quickly through email. Yeah.
Okay, so can I share that your website address is sourcehealth.co.uk?
Yeah, absolutely.
And people can contact you there, presumably.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm on Instagram, which is Donna Grant Therapy on Instagram, if anybody does that sort of stuff.
Okay, terrific. Lovely. Thank you very much again. I much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go well, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening. If you like this podcast, please remember to click on the little like button, and also feel free to make any comments below, and also subscribe to my channel if that resonates too. Until the next time, thank you again, Donna, and yeah, we'll be back. Thanks again.